Hey there, podcast world. It's Lee Boyd and Rob Beller
Good morning, everybody.
coming at you again for another exciting episode of
FNO.
InsureTech.
It's a very, very good day today.
It is a good day. I am coming to you today from the beautiful, drenched wet state of California.
And I'm coming from Waco, Texas. Just a wonderful day out there. No rain, and it's a summery, wintry day.
We're drenched here in California, which we always welcome, except I paid a price last night. I have an enormous cedar tree in the front of my house, and an enormous limb fell out of it last night, broke from the weight of the water, I guess, on the cones or in the needles, whatnot, and it fell. So it's laying in my front yard now.
What did it hit? Anything? House or car?
No, it missed the house, it missed the car, and so we're all good.
Wow. You got very lucky on that one.
We did, but speaking of cars, you're going to love this segue. Speaking of cars, we have an auto guy on the podcast today, don't we?
We do. We have a guy who knows autos better than pretty much everybody out there. He's been in it a very long time.
John Hall, who is the CEO of Audit Services Inc, ASI, is with us on the podcast today. And John is an old friend of 470s and an old friend of many of us at 470. And we're thrilled to have him with us because we wanted to have John on to talk about InsureTech in the auto world, which is not an area that Lee or I cover at all, but it's obviously closely related to the area of InsureTech that we do cover, which is more on property and in and around property. And we wanted to see what the difference is and what the different perspectives are on auto InsureTech.
You're right. You know, we get told a lot that property is 2, 3, 4 years behind the auto side. So why not go straight to the auto side, figure out where they're at, figure out some of the hurdles that they've had to jump to become automated and streamlined. And let's just see what the property side has to look forward to in the coming months and years.
Right. So without much ado, let's go straight into our episode with John Hall from Audit Services Incorporated. And here it is. Hello, podcast world. Welcome to another exciting episode of FNO InsureTech. You are accompanied by your two exciting, dynamic hosts, Rob Beller, that's me, and Mr. Lee Boyd.
That's me.
And we are doing an entirely remote broadcast today in that I am in Sacramento, California.
I'm in Waco, Texas.
That's right. Lee is in Waco, Texas. And our very, very, very special guest, who we are super lucky to have with us, is Mr. John Hall from Audit Services Incorporated, also known as ASI. And John, where are you today?
I'm in Conyers, Georgia, so just outside of fabulous Atlanta.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. What a nice thing you're doing.
Very excited to be here.
We feel very lucky to have you. John is, full disclosure, John is an old friend of ours at 470. And we're excited to have him because he is one of the more knowledgeable people we know about not only all things property InsureTech, but also auto InsureTech, because as John likes to say, he's an auto guy. Isn't that how you describe yourself?
It is. Born and raised in that industry, and it's very exciting things are happening today in the auto world, and some of those are starting to translate into the property space as well. So see a lot of things shifting in our space today.
You know, I mentioned that you're an old friend of ours and an old friend of 470. Of course, you all know that Lee and I work for 470. And when we started the company, which was in 2011, and we had no customers and no prospects and no money and no nothing, our friend John Hall reached out to us and threw us a bone. And the very first piece of work that we got was from ASI doing some kind of field work for rental car companies. Yes.
That's right. It was a very unique project that we had, and it was required a special skill set. And you were in a new transition, and it seemed like a great fit. And I think we had, I don't know, six to 12 months under that program, and that worked. It was fabulous. It was a great success, and it was a good example of innovation in a space that doesn't have much innovation. When you look at the fleet side of things in the auto space, that's a very, I hate to use the word stagnant, but that's the best thing I can come up with to describe it as a very stagnant industry. And that was a very unique thing we did in 2011, which was prior to the sort of tech revolution that we're in today.
Right. So let's just kind of bring us up to date and take a couple steps back and tell us quickly about your journey from college to the owner of ASI.
Yeah, so it even starts really before then. Like I said before, I was really born into the industry. So my father owned a collision repair center, and I grew up in that space. So nights and weekends and summer breaks were spent in that space. And I went to school here in the Atlanta area for mechanical engineering, and ended up working for a small company, a small IA firm at the time, that was doing some neat things around desk review, which is a space that we're in today. Over time, ASI was born and developed and spun out of that company. And 20 years later, here I sit today at the helm of Audit Services, which is a auto and property desk review company as our primary focus. We do a few other things, but that's the vast majority of it. So, like most people, I had no intention of this being a career path that are in most folks that are in the claim space. They came from an entirely different path, and mine is similar to that. So it's been a great opportunity, and it's something something I wouldn't change if I could do it over again. I certainly have enjoyed the ride, and I think there's some exciting things ahead for us all.
So you had some big news last year, correct?
That's right. That's so January of 2018, my company was acquired by Worley Specialty Services. So they're a national provider in the IA and TPA space. I do a lot with staffing as well. So they provide a lot of in-house staffing to various carriers. But it's been a great platform for us to piggyback on to continue to grow. We were at kind of a critical mass size where it was becoming difficult for us to continue to scale for the clients that we were having an opportunity to service. As the InsureTech world continues to grow, our company's been a huge benefactor of that space. We continue to staff ourselves or to model ourselves as a service provider for claims that run through the InsureTech channel. And by that, I mean, as more and more things are automated, those claims that become exceptions to those automated processes need to go somewhere, and they tend to come here. So we've been very fortunate that as the InsureTech business continues to expand and evolve, and as there's a shrinking pool of people out there that are servicing those claims in the field, those exceptions are routed our way, and that's been a fantastic thing for us.
Right, and I want to pick up on that exception idea a little bit later because we've spoken about that in the past, and I'm intrigued by that idea. I want to talk for a minute about ASI and what ASI does so our listeners understand what the company is and what it is that you do. On your website, it says you're a national estimate reviews supplier for property and casualty and the self-insurance market. What in the world does that mean?
That's a great question. So ASI's primary role is to review estimates for accuracy and cost. So that means we take estimates from various channels, whether that's from a collision repair center on the auto side or a contractor on the home side or commercial side, or even the independent adjuster estimates. We review those estimates, getting down into the weeds, the line item detail, and then make sure that the estimate is the cost of repairs is accurate to repair the loss back to its pre-loss condition. And that takes a lot of different forms. There's a lot of different work that's done to make sure that occurs. Whether that's making sure we're applying the right parts usage on an auto claim, the right labor rates for the market, the right repair times. Those are all auto-related things. And really the same can be said on a homeowner's claim as well, making sure we're applying the right materials, the right repair techniques, all those types of things. It's the auto industry is evolving quite a bit as OEM repair procedures are becoming a bigger and bigger challenge as vehicles and their technology that they have are changing rapidly. So making sure that we're repairing these vehicles in a safe manner is a big concern too of ours right now.
Sure, it seems like computers run our cars now.
You're 100% right. The repair technician, from 20 years ago is not the repair technician of today. It's a totally different landscape that's changing very, very rapidly. Almost daily, we see new bulletins about what's required to repair current day vehicles.
Is that to our benefit as car owners?
I think so. I mean, safety is certainly a huge thing. It's certainly improved over the last few years. The more technology that's in vehicles, I think the safer they are. There are some challenges. There's some downsides to that, cost being one of them. There may be less vehicle accidents because of some of the technology that's out there, but certainly the cost to repair those vehicles when they are in an accident is going up. The real challenge that you have is we're in a transition period right now. So you have some vehicles that have very elaborate technology that are on the roads, driving side by side with vehicles that are much older that are lacking that technology. And those two lines don't intersect very well sometimes.
So have you guys started working with anything about autonomous vehicles or self-driving vehicles? Has that entered into your world yet? I'm sure there's a lot of conversation on the auto side about that technology.
Well, there certainly is. Most of that is around what does that mean for the industry, or the auto appraisal industry, the estimate review industry, right? Inside claim reps and adjusters. It's a big challenge, even from the insurance side. It's where does the liability lie in a vehicle that's autonomously driven, right? Is that a manufacturer liability? Is that still the responsibility of the person sitting in the driver's seat? So there's a lot of challenges that are yet to be resolved around that. Now, what I will say is that the space is changing, but I think the rate of change is slower than most people would anticipate. There's a lot of studies that are out there that show that it generally takes technology between as much as 30 to 40 years to work its way through the fleet of vehicles that are on the road in the U.S. I think we're years and years away from having an entire fleet of self-driving vehicles. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think the challenge is really going to be self-driving vehicles behave quite a bit differently than vehicles that are driven by a human. And when you put those two vehicles together on the road, it's accidents happen. Self-driving cars, for example, brake much sooner than you or I would brake, and they're more susceptible to rear end collisions, things like that. So there's a lot of challenges that lie ahead for our industry, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming years.
Right. And like you said, it's a transition that's going to take probably decades, right? In our fleet of cars in our family, we still have some cars from the 1990s, and they run perfectly fine, and they're great cars. So it takes a long time for them to work their way out of it, right?
Right. And there's other factors. There's also just the piece that a lot of us like to drive cars, right? I don't know. It's a cultural shift that would have to occur for us to all be in autonomous vehicles. So there's also security concerns. I mean, I hear a lot of talk about that. If you move toward an autonomous fleet, what if you have bad actors that are able to take control of some of those vehicles in a mass way? So there's a lot of things that have to line up and be worked out before we have a fully autonomous fleet. What I see happening more, in the short run is really what we're already seeing today with Tesla, for example. We have vehicles that are capable of driving themselves on the highway, but they still require the driver to be engaged with the vehicle. I think that's where the biggest potential for change in the near future is really highway driving. That seems to be easier path for the autonomous vehicles to be on the open highway versus the city driving, which is actually where most of the accidents occurs in the city. So,
hey, John, I'm sitting here thinking about all of the technology that goes into our vehicles. There's more computers, there's more sensors. I guess, is there a correlation with repairs costing more and more due to this technology, or because of the technology, are we seeing less repairs needed on safer cars?
Well, there's definitely a correlation with the higher cost of repairs. We're dealing with that almost daily. Just simple things like recalibrating sensors after an accident. The biggest change in probably the last, say, 24 months in the auto industry is the introduction of pre-repair scanning. And what that is a running an electronic diagnostic machine on the vehicle after it's been in an accident to determine if there's fault codes that are registered in the computer system, as well as post-repair scanning. Almost, I don't know if every manufacturer that's in the U.S. now has issued a position statement on that. If not every manufacturer, almost all manufacturers have, in the last 24 months, issued position statements, typically requiring some type of scanning on certain year model vehicles, typically the newer model vehicles. And that's just one example of an additional cost that the insurance world is absorbing, as well as it's a change for the repair facilities. They're having to learn how to use that technology and what to do with that information once they have it. So the second part of your question is are we having less accidents because of safer vehicles? And there's a lot of data that's out there, different industry data. So vehicles, for example, that are self-braking, they see a sudden stop in front of them, they're more likely to not rear end the car in front of them. But there is some data that also suggests that they're more likely to be rear-ended themselves because they stop sooner and quicker than a human would stop. So there's cause and effect for everything, and I think it's to be determined in the long term how this plays out. Technology, though, I would say I think just intuitively is going to make us safer, but technology is expensive, and so those two lines have to intersect.
Right. Well, what about so with the change in repairs, how is insurance catching up or handling that? Because a lot of our policies say that they will repair your vehicle after a wreck, but a lot of them were written whenever sensors need to be recalibrated and systems need to be scanned. Is that kind of common practice that the insurance companies are actually paying for all of that?
It's becoming more common. They're adopting that philosophy. There's certainly holdouts that are out there where carriers are still resisting some of those repair procedures, but most carriers realize that it's more cost effective to make sure the vehicle's repaired right up front than it is to have a liability on the back end. As you know, insurance carriers are risk averse, and having an improperly repaired vehicle certainly can create some risk. So I think they're catching up very quickly on the technology front. We're seeing that most carriers are adopting those kind of philosophies that they'll cover the pre and post repair scanning. When it's done correctly, it's provable and it's required on those vehicles.
So let's dig into InsureTech on the auto side. Like we said at the top, we're really not we're not auto guys. We don't have a lot of auto background. We do primarily property. Talk to us about what's going on in auto InsureTech. Give us a quick down and dirty, level set of what's going on out there and what's changing and what's happening.
Sure. So I mean, when I first got into this space, like I said, 20 years ago, we were teaching repair facilities how to take digital photographs of vehicles. Now we're in a position, 20 years later, where we're communicating electronically with those same repair facilities in near real time, back and forth. The biggest drivers today, I mean, obviously everyone's looking for, ways to do things faster, more cost effectively, now about steps. And so we're seeing a lot of automation around, building, continue to build out that direct connectivity with the repair facility. They have real-time communication with the insurance carrier and vendors like ASI that sit in the middle. It's a huge initiative that's going on right now. The other big piece that we see developing pretty rapidly is some automation around the actual estimatics itself. So where we can take digital photographs of a damaged vehicle and do some scanning of those photographs and determine, a preliminary damage estimate right from photographs. Now, there's a lot of manual work that still has to be done on those estimates, but it gives you a starting point. The biggest thing that's sort of had a dramatic impact, I think, already is the ability to determine if it's something that's repairable or total loss with a high degree of accuracy from a photograph using a computer. And so that enables carriers to make real-time decisions about repairability versus total loss, which also allows them to determine where that vehicle needs to go and then in return, get money into the policyholder's hands sooner rather than later on a total loss vehicle. There's also there's a huge push to continue to build out what I call rule sets or automated claim review pieces. So the assignment goes to an individual body shop, whether that's a direct repair facility for the insurance company or it's a shop of the owner's choice of shop. We now have abilities where we can communicate with the vast majority of shops electronically, even if they're not on a direct repair type network platform. But then the shops can write those estimates. They can come back up through an automated rule set. It's a pass fail type system. If they pass, payment can be issued, repairs can begin immediately. If it's a fail, it comes out to a company like us where we correct those failures, work with that repair facility to turn that estimate into a pass, and then also get that payment out to the insured and in that repair.
So that's the exceptions that you were talking about before.
That's exactly right. We, as more and more automation occurs in that process, those exceptions, need a place, need a home. Many of the carriers aren't equipped because of staffing and those types of things, and we can talk about that some later, and the challenges around staffing today in our industry. But many of the carriers aren't equipped to handle those exceptions as they come out from this automation, and that's been the biggest benefit and biggest growth area for our company.
So this is, one of the reasons why we wanted you to be here is not only do you have this terrific perch that you sit on the auto side, you guys do a lot of property work too, right?
That's right. And, property in our industry tends to be a little bit behind the auto world, although I see it catching up rapidly, or at least there's, efforts underway. And so there's a lot of unique products and that are out there today where individuals are trying different things to catch up to some information on the auto world.
Can you share some of those things that you think are cool or that are exciting or that you guys have been able to put into use?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I see coming on the property side is the application of photo-based estimating. Obviously, we're doing that on the auto side today, which is consumer driven, or it's where a lower skill set individual can take take photos of a damaged auto, and we can write an estimate virtually to speed the claims process. We see that happening as well in the home. Now it's key to have the right claim for that process. I mean, there's just like in the auto industry where we've seen probably a shift where we're probably writing too many vehicles via photo estimating, too large of hits, not writing the proper claim. The same thing is true for home losses. But as you know, I mean, the average home loss is small. It's not we were talking to a few $1,000s for the average severity of the average claim. Now, many of those claims can be handled virtually with the assistance of the homeowner taking some pictures and or sending out someone to do just that volume driven way.
I've often heard people talk about auto being different from property because a vehicle is a vehicle. It has a bumper. All Lexuses of that model have the same bumper, the same, side panel, whatever. Everything's the same. But whenever you have a home, uniformity. But whenever you have a home, everything's very customized, different plasters, different drywalls, different shapes and sizes. A lot of people say that they feel as though the auto industry will always be ahead. The property industry is going to have a very hard time catching up to the speed of estimating virtually. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's all about the skill set of the person that's sitting behind the desk completing that virtual estimate. Like you said, there is a lot more uniformity in auto, but you're still making all the same decisions. Is a particular item, a particular part on a vehicle, is that repairable or does it require replacement? It's the same as true on a home. Is a particular material, whether it's drywall or flooring or cabinetry, is that repairable or does it require replacement? Then you're making those same decisions from there. If it requires replacement, what am I replacing it with? Do I have the right material? On an auto, if it requires replacement, what type of part am I replacing it with? OEM part, an aftermarket, a recycled part. The question set is really the same. Now, there's certainly on a property, there's more of them. Although with the technology changes in autos and the materials changes that we're seeing in automobiles, those questions are becoming much more complicated in auto than they were 20 years ago. For example, vehicles now, they're not made of, very rarely are made of, cold rolled steel like we had 20 years ago. Things now we have all different types of materials in a vehicle, whether it's carbon fiber or ultra high strength steel and aluminum. Those are all require different repair techniques. And those are questions we didn't have to ask, 20 years ago in the auto space. So I think it's the skill set of the person behind the desk and making sure you have the right person writing those virtual estimates that understands what they're looking at.
Let's talk about the skill set issue and the labor issue, which is really critical. I mean, that's something that we at our business, at our company, we deal with, we struggle with, we rise and fall on that. What are your thoughts about the labor marketplace and the transition from the field to the inside? One of our big customers, a major carrier, told me recently that they've gone through and closed all of their drive-in operations on the auto side, of course, and are repurposing all of their auto adjusters, to the inside. What are you seeing there? What are your thoughts there? What are the challenges?
Well, it's a fantastic question. It's probably our biggest challenge at ASI. There's a definite shrinking labor pool for what I would call physical damage appraisers and adjusters. So people that understand exactly what we were just talking about. They understand how to repair a vehicle. They understand how to repair a home. It's a changing marketplace. I've seen statistics, as much as a third of the industry, will retire in the next decade. And depends how you slice that data up and, who you talk to. But it's something that we have to all be prepared for. And that really answers part of the question around, what does this technology that's being developed in both the auto space and the home space mean for all these employees? And candidly, without this technology, I think the industry as a whole would be in real trouble because we wouldn't have the labor force that we need to continue to serve the marketplace. So I've had employees have asked me directly over the last few years, what does all this technology mean for me? We have automated scrubbing systems and computers or AI that can write pieces of an estimate. Does that mean am I out of a job? And my answer is no. In fact, I think you're going to be in higher demand tomorrow than you are today. Because of that shrinking labor force. So it's something we have to be very aware of. It's something that we're starting to spend significant financial resources on, which is trying to develop our own talent from the ground up, which is a very difficult thing to do. But it's something that we feel like we have to do to continue our growth rate in a shrinking labor market.
Yeah, we've taken that same tack also, that we have to train and develop people, even though it's obviously a long-term project and investment, but we have to do that just to keep up with the demands because of this changing labor pool. Are you seeing the same problem on the property side?
It's not as pronounced as it is on the auto side. And there's other challenges, on the labor pool on the auto side specifically, and we talked about it at length already, which is just the technology piece. So the training is much more intensive today than it was 20 years ago. You had the skill set required is greater. You mentioned it before. I mean, the repair technician on auto is going to end up being a computer programmer versus a hammer and dolly guy, right?
Hey, what about the accuracy? As we move claims virtually, I know we're speeding them up. We're getting claims settled quicker. Do you think that we're getting the same accuracy virtually with the new technology as we would send in a human out to inspect these autos or properties?
Well, that all depends, honestly, what the carrier does on the back end. I've seen some carriers that are more driven to process claims without human intervention. They're trying to figure out how many claims can they put through the system without anyone actually touching them. And if that drive is the predominant drive in the process, the motivating factor in the process, then I think carriers are losing some accuracy there. If carriers are very diligent about how they're going about it, writing the right rules for both the repairer and for kind of a back-end review process, then I think the accuracy can be maintained. Now, there is an equation that's there too on the carrier's side, which says, can we live with some additional inaccuracy in the estimates for faster, lower touch claims processing? And they have to all figure out what that acceptable leakage and inaccuracy, what that tolerance is for their business model. But I think in the end, as carriers, as we continue to work to refine these products, I think in the end we'll end up with a more accurate estimate, but I think that's going to take some time. And, on auto, I think it's easier to get there than it is on homeowners claims for the reasons you mentioned before. There's a lot more variability. A bumper on a Lexus, as you said, is a bumper on a Lexus. So it's easier to write rules-based logic around estimating for those things than it is on the home space.
One of the things that we share, John, is we work with carriers, both of us. And that's a very interesting group of businesses that view things differently and that partner with us differently and support us in different ways. In some of the initiatives, some of the more aggressive InsureTech initiatives that you guys have been involved in, either on the auto or the property side, what can you share about carriers, about their attributes? What are they doing? Do you tend to be in front of them? Do they ever get in front of you? Share some thoughts there.
So Rob, that's a great question. I guess what I would say is that the carriers that we've seen be the most successful with their InsureTech rollouts are the carriers that engage us early on in the process. When we're in the room with the carrier design phase, we can make sure that all the what ifs are addressed. So as claims are linear in process. They move from A to Z, but they don't always take the same path to get there. There's a lot of things that can happen in between. So when we're involved early on, the launch of new programs are more successful. They, typically we've seen when a carrier launches a new technology, they've accounted for, 80 or 90% of the claim circumstances that can occur. Those other 10% of the claims that don't take the happy path, we'll call it, in the claims process, become a real challenge for them. And so just like with anything else, it's very important to strategically map that out at the beginning. And when we're involved early on, we can help do that. I know at 470, you've done some very innovative things. What are you seeing? Do you have any experiences that relate to that?
We do. And I like what you said about being involved early on with the carriers and having a conversation. If we can all buy in together and all think about the positives and negatives at the beginning, it really helps it go. So yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, it's having the right goal, having everybody on board with that goal is key to making some of these new technologies work. Making sure that all the players that will be engaged understand, what the end goal is, makes it a much better experience for the end consumer, ultimately the, vehicle or property owner.
Right. One of our big takeaways from some of our pilots have been we need to check in with each other and everybody more often. We need to talk about what's working, what's not working. We need to have regular cadence calls and discussions and actually in-person meetings to review and to see things. It's very important not to have the waterfall effect, right? Where you do a whole bunch of work and then go back and look and say, oh, that was okay. But yet have more of the agile effect of where we continually tweak and change the process along the way.
You're 100% right. And the other key is start small, and fast. And like you said, it's very important to be engaged with the individuals on the front line. We've been involved in projects where we've been engaged at a very high level and, it appears everything is going well. And then when you do that frontline follow-up, you find out that there's some real gaps in understanding or bugs in your process that you weren't even aware of. And it may not be going as smooth as you think it is. So, yeah, I agree completely. Having those regular cadence calls, especially early on, is very, very important.
It's funny you say that. Our biggest failure, our most famous internal failure that we've had is with a customer that your company and our company share. And that's exactly what happened. First of all, the scope crept. And when you have scope creep, that's a problem. It wasn't simple. The cadence wasn't good. And like Lee said, the waterfall effect happened and it got away from us too quickly. But one of the things that we've found is the honesty and integrity of the partnership between the carrier and the vendor is critical. The commitment that the carrier has to both to the program and to working closely with the vendor, I think, is the single most important factor of success. Would you agree with that?
No, absolutely, I would. It's as change is typically painful in any industry or space that you're operating in, and the insurance industry as a whole is a very conservative, slow to change industry. Now, there's a lot of drive right now. You see, a lot of carriers are talking about being innovative, but at the end of the day, frontline employees are still very slow to change and slow to adapt change. And that communication of identifying any challenges early on and being able to be responsive to those, fix them quickly, and make changes and adapt your program is key to success. I would agree completely. Important to have a carrier that and representatives there that understand that that having some failure is okay. Learning what doesn't work is just as important as learning what does work. That's been one of our philosophies as a company. We're ASI is not a technology based company. We don't develop tech. We try to stay agnostic to the technology that's out there and work with the best and brightest technology providers around. And generally, the person who develops technology first doesn't get it exactly right. It's usually the second or third generation of that technology, often from a different source, that is most successful.
Yeah, I would say you're absolutely right. I mean, early on, I partnered with a couple of technologies that I really thought were earth shattering or changing. But, to come to find out, it was a second or third generation of either their product or another person's product who really changed the game. But as we are pretty early into the InsureTech changing world, we are going to get sucked up into some of these technologies. But I think you absolutely hit on the head whenever you said that we have to figure out what doesn't work just as much as we have to figure out what does work. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one.
Yeah, and the other thing that's really important to consider when you're looking at technology in the insurance space is to realize that technology doesn't always fit every claim. I alluded to that, earlier. We talked about photo estimating. There's, individuals that would argue that every claim can be handled virtually. I believe there's always going to be a space for, traditional field adjusting on larger, more complex claims, whether that's auto or home. There's always going to be a need for that. It's going to be fewer, farther between, which is ultimately going to drive the cost of those services up. But you'll have a higher skill set person because there'll be fewer of them, and they'll drive innovation in the space. It'll drive excellence. You'll have fewer of them, and the strongest performers will survive. If that makes sense.
So let's just take a minute as we come to the end of our time together and talk about 2-year, 5-year, 10-year view. One of the things that we've said many times on this call that we're big fans of this phrase that, and you kind of touched on it earlier, things will probably change less in the next few years than we expect, and probably change more in the next 5 to 10 years than we expect. What are your thoughts? Where's it going? What do you see? What do you see in the future when you look down the road?
I see a smaller workforce in our industry overall. I see, machines and machine learning processing more claims than it does today. But I still see, I mentioned just a second ago, I still see a presence in the field. I still see, individuals on auto and home performing inspections. I see more being done behind a desk. One thing that I found interesting as we've looked at technology is there still is a resistance from the consumer in a lot of cases, and that may change as generations change, but to adopt some technology. So I think the role of people in the field may change. We may have more photo takers, if you will, on both auto and home than we have field estimators today. How fast we get there. I think we're going to get on the photo estimating thing. I see that as a near-term change. Claims being processed in mass using, artificial intelligence. I think that's probably a 5 to 10 year project where you see a real impact in the industry from that. It will certainly be interesting to see it develop over time. But there's other things that are going to change too. They're going to drive that process. Especially in the automotive space, autonomous vehicles will start to arrive, or at least semi-autonomous vehicles that are self-driving some of the time. Construction of vehicles will change. I think we'll see that catch up on the home side as well. As we had, you have things like Tesla's new solar powered roofing shingle and things that could have dramatic impact on our industry. So technology on that side will drive what happens on the claim side of things, I would say.
Well, there could be a lot of job security in that, right?
Absolutely. But it's important to keep up and to make sure that we as service providers, that we're able to provide the service that's required. So we invest a lot of time and money into training and certifying our people. There's, various certifications depending on what they're doing that we spend a lot of time and money on. And I think that is only going to get, magnified exponentially as technology increases on both auto and home claims.
We agree. We're very focused on not just training, but where should our training be going? Where should we be going in training? It's not as easy as it used to be when in the old days you could stamp out the same training program year after year. It's far more dynamic.
Well, you're 100% right, and it's a challenge too to understand how to apply those investment dollars in training, because we talked at length about the shrinking labor force, which makes the trained individual in higher demand. So as a company, when you invest a lot of money in the individual, it's if that individual leaves and goes to your competitor, that's a challenge. And you're starting over.
Right. Well, listen, John, we can't begin to thank you enough. What a pleasure and a privilege to have you with us.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a great discussion, and I think you could spend hours on the topic and not cover all the ground that's out there to be covered. But one thing's for sure, that time will tell us where we're headed, and it's our job to try to figure out and predict the future and make sure we're ready for it.
I like that. With that insight, will you come back and join us again sometime?
I would love to. Just say when.
Thank you very much, John.
We'll count on that. We'll put that one in the bank.
Very good.
What a terrific episode that was. Very interesting perspectives from outside of our specific industry, but many which could apply to us.
Right. I think some of the takeaways from that conversation, one of them was streamlining workflows. The auto inspection side has found a way to really make rule-based decisions, to say that if damages look like this, if repairs look like this, they're okay. And then you have the exceptions where the humans have to look at them. Whereas on the property side, there's a large amount of exceptions still. We haven't found a way to really streamline the reviews or the estimates so that rules can be caught. So I think that's something to really look forward to on the property side, as we all can, to bring technology in and to work with it and teach it.
Sure. One of the standard differences about auto and property that we've talked about for years is the difference in uniformity, and John hit on that. Whereas, a car is a car, same make and model is the same no matter where it is in the country, versus two homes in different places in the country can be entirely different construction methods, entirely different materials.
Right. It's often led me to think about auto versus properties, because auto, you can look at a Lexus and they're all built the same, but homes are all built different. And it really got me thinking, if there was a database out there, whenever a builder create a home, that if there was a way to categorize the actual materials, measurements of a home, so that a repair company could actually go back and pull up this database and know exactly what's in the home.
I think there's some companies out there either attempting to do that or doing that. I believe CoreLogic is on top of that.
Yeah, CoreLogic's a great one. They're real good at figuring out, roofing materials, interior, size of homes, prior losses, things like that. I think as the technology grows and people start sharing data, it's really going to be for the greater good.
We're seeing an interesting battle begin to heat up between CoreLogic and Exact, just on the side too, with CoreLogic's full acquisition now of Symbility.
Yeah, I think that's really going to be a big play. As you know, Symbility is very large in markets outside of the U.S., whereas Exact is very large inside the U.S. and not as large outside. It's a different model in estimating platforms that each one brings. And for some reason, America is into, a certain way of doing things, as where Australia is into another. But really what I'm interested in is I guess I would say the fight to bring better data, more comprehensive data into a single platform.
I want to talk again about exceptions. John and I have spoken many times about exceptions and about how exceptions are so important to his business. And we see that all the time. I mean, supplements are super common in the auto business because once you get into a vehicle and the damage, frequently there's more there. It's a little different than they might have anticipated up front. Does that same concept exist on the property side, Lee?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you'll repair a floor or a home and think everything's fine. But a lot of times what happened during that repair process, they open a wall that wasn't seen to find more damage, or a closet door that wasn't previously open to find more damage. Just like in the autos, whenever you think everything's fixed, you go to turn on the radio and find that the radio is not working. So yeah, it does very much still exist on the property side.
Well, a big thank you and appreciation out to John Hall for giving us some time today and sharing his insights about InsureTech on the auto side.
Right. John, thank you very much for being a part today.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next time, Podcast World, when we have the guys from Hover join us in studio.
Very excited about that one.
Until then, signing off.